The scene opens with Rosa's voice cutting through the silence, demanding to know if the man before her had ever truly loved her. He shot back after a beat, questioning why she'd even bring that up, but Rosa pressed him again, needing to know if he loved her or not. Her voice trembled with desperation as she pleaded for an answer, repeating the question over and over, her vision starting to swim. Through the blur, she could barely recognize the person in front of her before she suddenly jolted awake from the nightmare, finding herself scantily dressed and staring up. She was staring blankly at the ceiling of a lavish hotel room, muttering to herself about what a messed up dream that was. But before she could even process it, she froze in horror when she noticed someone was sleeping right there beside her. The guy next to her shot up, startled, complaining she'd scared him and asking what her problem was, just as a girl on the couch yawned, wondering what all the noise was about. A completely stunned, Rosa demanded to know who they were and how in the world they got into her room. The guy looked baffled, asking if she was kidding, since they had all been partying hard on the hotel rooftop the night before. He reminded her she was the one who said it was cool for them to crash with her, adding that a few others were still passed out somewhere outside. Rosa rubbed her throbbing forehead, asking if that's really what happened, realizing she must have been so hammered she didn't remember a thing. The guy sighed, remarking that she was even colder than the rumors made her out to be, while the girl next to him asked if Rosa at least remembered her name. After a moment, Rosa nodded and called her Kathy, which made the guy chuckle and say she wasn't even close, prompting the girl to snap back that her name was Geneva. Later on the beach, laughter echoed as people played in the waves, but Rosa just sat under an umbrella, staring blankly at her phone. Geneva, lounging beside her, reminded her that she'd said she was just on vacation for her break and would head home in a month or two. Another girl chimed in, teasing that Rosa should at least enjoy the hotel perks while she could, especially the fancy hair oil. One of the guys walking by snickered that no amount of hair oil could fix her straw-like hair, just trying to get a rise out of her. The girl shot him a dirty look, called him a bald-headed loser, and told him to go take a swim or something. Meanwhile, Rosa's phone started ringing, and she saw the caller ID was Seo Yaya Eon. After a second's hesitation, she answered. John's voice immediately came on the line, complaining that it had been a whole month and asking if being ignored was all he deserved. He called her out, saying he saw her on Instagram pretending to be busy, when really she was just partying it up everywhere. He sarcastically added what a perfect daughter she was being, which made Rosa frown and demand to know why he was calling. John blew past her annoyance, asking when she was coming back to Korea, so Rosa told him she'd probably be back just before the semester started. She pushed again, asking for the real reason he called, and he vaguely mentioned that a lot was going on and something fun was happening back home. When she asked what he meant, he just gave a nervous laugh, saying it was too hard to explain and she should just come back to Korea to see for herself. His cryptic response left her completely puzzled. Geneva, who had been listening in, teased that the voice sounded like a man's and asked if it was her dad. Rosa quietly replied that she didn't have a father. Geneva then pried, asking if it was her Korean boyfriend, but Rosa shut it down. She insisted he was just a college friend calling out of the blue to talk nonsense. But after hanging up, she couldn't shake the feeling that something might have happened to her mother. She immediately opened her browser and searched for the Flora Hotel, learning it was a global luxury chain with over 30 locations worldwide. The newest branch had just opened in Miami, boasting a rooftop bar, a fine dining restaurant, and a casino exclusively for VIPs. As soon as she touched down in Korea, her driver was there to meet her, remarking that she was back way sooner than expected since she usually spent the whole 2-month break overseas. Rosa just played it cool, saying she was feeling a bit worn out and just wanted to be home, adding that with the Lunar New Year right around the corner, she figured it was the perfect time to surprise her mom. After a beat, she casually asked how her mother was doing, explaining she hadn't given her a heads up about her return, just to make the surprise a real one. The question seemed to make the driver tense up. He forced a stiff smile and assured her the madam was just fine, but his awkwardness was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Rosa couldn't help but wonder what was up with his weird vibe, but she quickly pushed the thought aside, deciding it wasn't her problem anymore as the car pulled up to the sprawling estate. The mansion was a dazzling spectacle, its glamorous facade practically glowing in the daylight, looking so calm and perfect you'd never guess at the shadows hiding within its walls. Climbing out of the car, Rosa stretched her tired limbs with a sigh about how wiped she was and immediately called for the butler to get her luggage up to her room. Hearing only silence, she figured he was probably out running errands and just left her bags by the staircase for him to deal with when he got back. But as she turned to go inside, her eyes locked onto a pair of strange men's shoes sitting by the door, and a cold, sinking feeling instantly took root in her stomach. A wave of dread washed over her as she wondered who they belonged to. And tiptoeing up the stairs, she started to hear muffled noises drifting from her mother's bedroom. Her hands started to tremble as she crept closer to the door, her heart pounding against her ribs with every single step she took. She paused right outside, silently begging for any kind of warning before she saw what was on the other side. And then, steeling herself, she took a peek. Through the tiny crack in the door, her eyes widened, and her entire body went rigid. The sight struck her like a bolt of lightning, knocking the air from her lungs. She was frozen in place, her mind completely refusing to process the scene unfolding before her. Of all the wild things she'd ever experienced, nothing could have prepared her for the shock of finding her mother getting cozy with some total stranger. Suddenly, her mother's head whipped around. She gasped in pure horror at the sight of Rosa in the doorway, stammering about why she was home so early, while the half-dressed man just stared back, completely dumbfounded. His face was a mask of pure confusion, and Rosa's heart hammered painfully as she looked from one to the other, her mind reeling in a fog of utter disbelief. In that single, horrifying instant, the perfect, polished world she had known for 22 years began to shatter into a million pieces. Later, Rosa coldly asked if she needed to have a word with that man outside. Her mother, shockingly composed, simply said yes. Rosa, completely baffled, demanded to know why she was acting this way now, after always keeping her romantic life so far away from her. Her mother let out a soft sigh, explaining that those other men were never serious. They were just useful arrangements for a woman in her position, the powerful Lee Suryeon. As the chairwoman of the Flora Group, she had needs. But this time, she insisted, Yanwoo was different from all the rest. A word that made Rosa's eyebrows shoot up skeptically. Oh, is it because of that tacky tattoo on his back? She shot back sarcastically, making her mother's eyes flicker with surprise that she'd already seen it. She let out a nervous laugh, trying to play it off with, well, all the kids are getting tattoos these days. Rosa's reply was like ice. Maybe kids do, but what are you doing with someone like that? Especially one with such a god-awful sense of style, she continued. Do you even know what he does for a living? Or how old he is? Her mother answered, almost nonchalantly, that he was 24. The number hit Rosa like a ton of bricks. She herself was only 22, and her stomach plummeted as she wondered if her mother was truly this desperate. Before she could get another word out, Suryeon cut her off, reminding her that she'd lived nearly 20 years without a partner and that it must have been lonely. Rosa scoffed internally. Her mom wasn't even 50 yet. This whole situation was just unbelievable. Then Suryeon went on, saying Yanwoo was the one who had finally filled that emptiness in her life. He claimed to have a kind heart and that if he lived with them, he could help mend the wounds from all those years she spent raising Rosa alone. Rosa cut him off sharply, demanding to know why he would dare bring up her father. Yanwoo just smiled gently, and then he dropped the final bombshell. Her mother had already decided he would be moving in with them. The words left Rosa utterly shocked and speechless. Later, as she stood staring at a family photo on the table, Yanwoo entered the room, greeting her politely and asking if her talk with her mother had gone well. Rosa turned toward him with a disgusted expression and silently walked out. Yanwoo tried to stop her, saying he had heard a lot about her from Suryeon and hadn't expected they would meet so soon. As she began to climb the stairs, she called after him, saying she knew her mother had told her to get along with him, but she didn't feel like it. Once the semester started, she would be busy anyway. Until then, she would think of him only as a live-in worker and ordered him not to talk to her. Without waiting for his reaction, she walked upstairs. Suryeon, standing nearby, chuckled and told Yanwoo not to worry, saying Rosa was just acting cold for now and would warm up eventually. Yanwoo simply smiled faintly, saying he wasn't worried since she was her mother's daughter. He then stepped closer towards Suryeon. Later that evening, the scene shifted to a quiet bar where Yan was sitting with a carefree mood. Rosa asked if this was what he had meant earlier. Jian, confused, asked what she was talking about. Jian nearly choked on his drink, asking if she meant Chairwoman Lee. When she nodded, he asked about the man, for which Rosa said Jian had mentioned that she had business in Korea and even called her before. Jian smirked and admitted that the call had just been a prank. He had been bored and wanted to mess with her. Rosa stared at him in disbelief, thinking he had lost his mind, but Jian waved his hand dismissively, saying that wasn't the issue now. He told her to sit down and tell him everything properly. Though irritated, Rosa knew Jian was the only person she could confide in. She sighed and told him that the man was 24. Jian was quite surprised, saying that was practically half her mother's age, adding jokingly that her mother deserved respect for living life to the fullest. Rosa glared at him and asked what had even happened while she was away, wondering if he had heard anything. Jian shrugged, saying it was her house, so why would he know more than her? Still, he admitted that the whole thing didn't sound like a wholesome relationship and asked what the man's name was. Rosa answered that his name was Yen Wu. Jian said he had never heard of him and asked what he looked like. Rosa paused, recalling his face. She remembered how he had a certain air of sorrow around him, something unsettling and strangely captivating. He was striking at first sight, but the way his eyes carried that shadowed gloom made her think he had been through far too much. She told Jian that he just looked older than his age. As Jian walked her out of the bar later, he asked what she planned to do now. Rosa replied quietly that she didn't know yet. As they walked past a nearby hallway, they overheard a man talking. One asked if there were any guys available at the moment, explaining that a group of Japanese executives had just arrived. The receptionist asked whether they wanted girls or guys, and the reply came that they were looking for good-looking men. One of them then asked where Yanwu was. The receptionist hesitated before replying, but the customer cursed, saying that Yanwu had quit. He added that Yanwu would have been perfect for the job. The receptionist nervously said she would call in whoever could come quickly, to which the other nodded, saying that rumor had been going around among the staff that Yanwu was the type with affection issues who made older women go wild. John chuckled at the comment, shaking his head as he laughed crudely. Rosa, standing nearby, heard everything. Her expression darkened, her aura turning cold and sharp. John, trying to lighten the tension, joked that maybe they were confusing Yanwu with someone named Dogo, but his attempt at humor didn't work. Later that night, Rosa returned home and entered her room, feeling strangely uncomfortable in her own house. She recalled John trying to cheer her up earlier, telling her not to overthink and saying that overthinking wasn't her style anyway. But she found his words easier said than done. Just then, a faint sound reached her ears, moans coming from the direction of the master bedroom. She froze, her face twisting in disbelief. As she stood on the veranda, she cursed inwardly, wondering how a house worth billions could have such thin walls. She thought, bitterly, that for $3,000 per pyong, she didn't even have the right not to hear her mother's noises. She turned toward her door, muttering that she should just go inside, since they probably wouldn't hear anything from there. But as she stood still, her gaze shifted toward the master bedroom again. John's earlier words replayed in her mind, the type that makes older women go wild. Her chest tightened as curiosity began to creep in despite herself. As Rosa approached the suite, she wondered if her mother had ever known what kind of man he really was before bringing him in. She thought that perhaps if her mother had seen the kind of intimacy they shared, she would have understood everything. As Rosa moved closer to the room, she froze in place, paralyzed by the sounds coming from inside. She slowly backed away and lay down on her bed, trying to convince herself that she only needed to sleep and clear her mind. She believed that if she ignored it, it would feel as though nothing had happened, as she was never the kind of person who liked being curious. Yet, the continuous noises coming from the other side of the wall made it impossible to rest. Lying there, she muttered to herself, wondering where her headphones were, while on the other side, Yanwu was with her mother. He whispered in a nervous tone, asking what if someone outside heard them, mentioning that Rosa might wake up, but Sirion replied coldly, telling him not to stop and to ignore everything else, urging him to continue what he was doing. Yanwu's eyes landed on a framed photo of Sirion and Rosa placed nearby. For a brief moment, he paused, then nodded faintly, whispering to himself that he would continue. Afterwards, as breakfast was being served, a spoon accidentally fell under the table. When Rosa leaned down to pick it up, she froze again. Under the table, she saw Yanwu glancing at her. He quickly told her to stay seated and that he would pick it up instead. Rosa sat upright again, uneasy, wondering what she had just seen, feeling a strange discomfort. It had already been 2 weeks since she returned to Korea, and during that time, she had noticed how easily Yanwu had blended into their household. He seemed comfortable using the family's things as if they were his own. He was friendly with the staff, and of course, he treated her the same way. One day, as Rosa was about to leave for a jog, Youngwoo asked where she was heading, offering her a cup of warm water. He asked her to take it along since the weather was cold and advised her not to catch a cold. Rosa, taken aback by his tone, felt disgusted by the familiarity. Without saying a word, she turned away and ran toward her car, thinking that she had already asked him not to talk to her. Yet he kept acting close, as if he were her father or someone who had authority over her. She felt suffocated and thought that maybe it would be better to stay in a hotel instead. But as she imagined it, she could already hear the hotel staff gossiping, questioning why the chairwoman's daughter was staying there, what had happened at home, and if something was wrong. The mere thought of it exhausted her even more. Rosa sighed, feeling mentally drained. She thought that Yanwu was simply too much. She could not understand how her mother could bring in some strange man overnight, claim he was family, and let him live with them. After that, as Rosa was watching Yanwu walk past a table, he stumbled slightly. She thought that he might just be some random nobody who once worked serving drinks for a living, someone her age who had no place here. While she was lost in thought, Yanwu suddenly appeared, using a rag to clean up. Rosa's irritation deepened as she watched him kneel down to wipe the floor. She felt that cleaning was precisely the kind of thing he should be doing. Yet, something about him made her uneasy. Her eyes unintentionally drifted toward him, and she found herself staring at his butt and then at his posture. Just then, the nanny called out to Yanwu from the hallway. Hearing her voice, Rosa quickly crouched down, hiding even after being on the first floor to avoid being seen. The nanny entered, asking if something had spilled, and offering to handle the cleaning herself since it was her job. But Yunwoo politely declined, saying he could clean it himself and that she shouldn't worry if she was busy. The nanny praised him for being so well-mannered, saying she was heading out for grocery shopping. Before leaving, she asked if there was anything he wanted for dinner. Yanwu hesitated for a moment, then replied that the menu should be decided by the family who lived there. Danny smiled, telling him cheerfully that he lived there too, and should feel free to make suggestions, reminding him that he sat with them at the table. Her words seemed to leave Yanwu quiet for a while as he nodded with an uncertain smile. She thought about her connections with Eugene Wuan and how dealing with them constantly wore her out. She wished she could stop thinking altogether, that her mind would just go silent. After soaking for a while, she got up and stepped out, wrapping a towel around herself. But as she opened the door, she froze once more. Yanwu was standing in the hallway holding one of her bras in his hand. The air between them turned heavy. Rose's eyes locked on the item, and then on him. Her face turned red as she stated that it was hers. Yanwu, startled, fumbled, dropping it immediately. His face flushed as he nervously tried to explain, stuttering that he thought no one was home and that he had assumed she went out. Before he could continue, he turned his face away, trying to avert his gaze, and told her to put on some clothes first. Rosa, however, stepped closer, glaring at him, her hand poking at his chest. She leaned slightly toward him, her expression unreadable. Yanwu, keeping his eyes shut tightly, tried to insist once more that it wasn't what she thought, that he wasn't doing anything inappropriate. But before he could finish, Rosa slapped him hard across the face. After Rosa's slap landed across Yanwu's face, it took him a few moments to gather himself. Still trying to process what had just happened, he quickly apologized, explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. But Rosa cut him off sharply, saying she wasn't even angry. She simply wanted to hit him. She coldly asked if he planned to hit her back, or perhaps run to her mother and tell her that her daughter had slapped him after he saw her naked. Her voice carried a tone of defiance as she told him he couldn't do anything about it anyway. She warned that as long as he lived under the same roof as her, she would keep tormenting him simply because his presence made her uncomfortable. Yanwu lowered his gaze, his expression filled with quiet despair. Seeing his face, Rosa remarked that being slapped and insulted by a girl 2 years younger should have been humiliating. If she were in his position, she said, she would have felt utterly worthless. Yet, he stood there silently, neither speaking nor defending himself. She told him to listen carefully. She didn't need a stepfather. He could either leave on his own or be thrown out. The choice was his. With that, she turned to leave, but suddenly froze as she felt Yanwu grab her leg. Startled, she looked down to see him kneeling, his hand clutching her ankle, pleading for her to listen. He begged her to believe that it was truly a misunderstanding. He explained that he had called out through the crack in the door but heard no response, so he assumed no one was there and stepped inside. Rosa watched him closely, her anger shifting into a strange curiosity. The way he knelt so easily didn't seem born of panic or desperation. It felt practiced, too casual, too natural, like someone who had knelt countless times before. Yunwoo's voice trembled as he continued to plead. He admitted his fault, asking her not to tell the chairwoman, saying he would do anything in return. Tears welled up in his eyes as his hands shook. Rosa bent slightly, gripping his face with her hand, staring directly into his tearful eyes. For a moment she hesitated, then ordered him in a cold, firm tone to get out. Youngwoo tried to say something more, his voice breaking, but she interrupted, repeating for him to leave her room. He bowed his head and apologized once again before slowly backing away and stepping out. As Rosa exhaled deeply, she turned toward her shelf and noticed a pile of clothes falling down. Realizing what they were, she sighed. It was the laundry. She recollected that maybe a few moments earlier, the nanny had asked Yunwoo for help since she needed to finish some chores before leaving for the day. There had been a lot to carry, and Yunwoo had agreed willingly, asking what needed to be done. The nanny had handed him a pile of clothes and told him to take the freshly folded clothes up to the young lady's room. He had called out for Rosa several times, but there had been no thinking the coast was clear. He'd slipped in and set the clothes on her table. But when a couple of items tumbled to the floor, he bent over to grab them. And that's the exact moment Rosa walked out of the bathroom, catching him in that seriously compromising position. Now, standing there all alone in her room, Rosa gritted her teeth, trying to convince herself she didn't give a damn about his excuses. She'd warned him plenty of times. He should have gotten the message by now that he was never going to be a part of her family. And yet, she couldn't stop replaying the moment he'd dropped to his knees so fast, crying and pleading for her to forgive him. Something about that whole scene just stuck with her. Looking down at her hand, she saw the faint red print left behind from the slap. Her palm still had a dull sting to it. She found herself rubbing the spot over and over, a weird, unfamiliar feeling washing over her. It definitely wasn't satisfaction. It was something else entirely, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The more she scratched at the mark, the more it itched, until she broke the skin and it started to bleed. A strange chill shot down her spine as a wave of unease she couldn't place washed over her. Later that day, her mom, Suryan, got home and immediately summoned them both to the living room, demanding to know what they'd been up to while she was out. Dead silence. Rosa refused to even look at him, while Yan Wu just sat there beside her, his face a complete blank. When she finally risked a quick peek at him, she saw there wasn't a single bruise on his face and figured she must not have hit him all that hard. That's when Suryan snapped, asking if Rosa was just going to ignore her. Rosa shot back with an icy tone, asking what her mom thought she could have possibly done with that man when they were just in their own rooms. Her choice of words immediately set her mother off. Suryan completely lost it, demanding to know how Rosa could still call Yan Wu that man instead of using his actual name. She laid into her for being so disrespectful. Yan Wu immediately jumped in, trying to play peacemaker. He tried to assure Suryan that everything was fine and that Rosa hadn't done a single thing wrong, but Suryan wasn't having it and cut him off, telling him to stay out of it. Taking a deep breath, Suryan told Rosa that maybe the new family dynamic didn't feel natural yet, but she needed to at least try to be more considerate. For her own good, she had to start addressing Yan Wu properly, no matter how awkward it felt. Rosa just stayed quiet, shooting daggers at Yan Wu from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but think how bizarre it was to see his perfectly calm, unbothered face sitting right next to her mom, like nothing had happened at all. He looked totally composed, without a hint of the humiliation from earlier. The thought of it seriously creeped her out. She even caught herself wondering what might have happened if she'd hit him just a little bit harder. That's when Suryan's gaze landed on Rosa's hand. She spotted the red scratches and immediately asked what happened, wondering if she'd gotten hurt. Rosa glanced down at her palm and quickly lied, saying it just happened when she was washing her hands. She was thinking about the chance that she might have actually left a mark on Yanwu's face. When Suryan kept pushing, asking what on earth she was washing off that made her scrub her own skin raw, Rosa muttered coldly that she was just trying to get something dirty off. Across from her, Yanwu went completely rigid at her words, his shoulders tensing up as he ducked his head a little. Suryan frowned, but decided to drop it for now. She just told Rosa to finish eating and then get her hand looked at, and Rosa just gave a quiet nod. The rest of the meal was painfully awkward, with Suryan trying every now and then to make small talk. Rosa just gave short, bored answers while Yan Wu plastered on a weak smile, trying his best to pretend like everything was perfectly normal. Later, Rosa found herself wondering if she'd ever intentionally destroyed something she used to really want. The thought brought a small smirk to her face as she admitted to herself that it had been a thrill so thrilling, in fact, that she was almost mad that she could even call that kind of destructive fun. Fast forward to the present, and Rosa's at a pub, surrounded by friends who are celebrating their last few days of freedom before the new semester kicks off. She hadn't even planned on coming out. She just wanted to chill at home. But then her mom suggested that maybe the three of them could all have dinner together, or that she could invite a friend over. Desperate to get out of the house, Rosa ended up meeting her friends instead, figuring it was way better than being the third wheel on her mom's little dinner date. Compared to that nightmare, this loud, chaotic party felt like pure bliss. The place was buzzing with laughter and chatter as everyone drank and had a good time. Suddenly, someone yelled over the loud music, asking who the guy in the red puffer jacket was. As they looked familiar but unfamiliar at the same time, Rosa turned slightly at the sound of another voice as a boy pointed across the table, exclaiming that it was John with a grin on his face, bumped lightly into his friend as he greeted him, saying it had been a long time since they last met. He commented on how the friend's hair had grown so much that he almost didn't recognize him, as if he had grown while no one was watching. One of the girls nearby asked where Jian should sit and whether they needed to shuffle around, but Jian waved off the suggestion, saying there was an empty seat right there, teasing her about looking sleepy. Rosa just gave him a look, pretending not to react. As the group grew louder, Jan took a bottle and jokingly opened it with a dramatic gesture, earning laughter from everyone around. He poured drinks with exaggerated affection, saying that he poured as much as he loved them all. Lifting his glass, he declared they should all live with love. Rosa watched quietly, her thoughts drifting. While Seo Yan is the fourth son of Huyang Construction, they had known of each other through social gatherings as children, but only became close after ending up in the same university department. Rosa remembered how Yan had once teased her about reading an article on the Korea scandal, saying he hadn't realized they'd be in the same field. He had tried to guess her name back then, calling her Rose, and when she didn't respond, he'd tried again. Dandelion, then something about flowers, until he finally remembered and proudly said, Rosa. She had found him to be a smooth talker, the kind who could make anyone smile without much effort. His looks drew attention wherever he went, and though he often appeared careless, he was surprisingly composed when it mattered. Many in their department were children of influential families, and being of similar rank had naturally kept them connected. Still, for Rosa, her closeness with John had more complicated reasons than mere status. In the present, as the night went on, someone suggested a second round of drinks, and others excitedly proposed heading to karaoke. A few agreed, but John seemed distracted. He felt something brush against his leg. It was Rose's leg, a quiet signal. Without saying anything, he leaned closer and murmured that they should meet again once classes started. The girl beside him looked surprised, reminding him that he had just said he had no plans. Jian smiled and replied that something had just come up, slipping his fingers lightly along Rosa's sleeve under the table. Later that night, after leaving the party, Jian caught up to Rosa outside. Walking behind her with his usual teasing tone, he asked if her father had done something to upset her again, saying it wasn't healthy to relieve stress through doing that thing. Rosa turned to glare at him, asking why he had come along if he was just going to talk nonsense. Jan shrugged, replying that for him, it wasn't stress, it was simply fun. They eventually arrived at a hotel. Once inside, Jan pulled her close and kissed her roughly. Rosa didn't resist. The two stumbled toward the sofa, their movements heated and desperate. As he went deeper, Jan asked why she couldn't focus, jokingly asking if she had fought with her new dad. Rosa's expression hardened instantly. She warned him to say that again, and she would hit him. But Jan only smirked, whispering provocatively if she wanted him to show her how to make her family feel humiliated. His words grew sharper as he continued, saying she was to drag a stranger into the house without warning, then lock herself away like nothing had happened. He said he didn't even know what was going on inside that house, but somehow she made him curious even though it was her home. Rosa tried to push him off, but he held her tighter. For a moment, she felt something heavy press inside her chest. It was as if she didn't belong anywhere. not even in her own home. She realized how hollow she had begun to feel. Her breathing grew uneven as she let out a faint cry, lost between anger and confusion. Jian leaned closer, asking if she wanted to move to another spot for another round. Rosa cursed at him, calling him insane. But Jian only laughed and continued, saying he'd bet her new stepdad would regret it one day, that he probably didn't even realize how beautiful his stepdaughter was. He told her to stop talking and just keep going. Rose's expression froze. Against her will, an image of Yen Wu's face flashed in her mind, the same expressionless calm, the same quiet presence that irritated her endlessly. Her heart twisted at the thought. She muttered softly that if this was what Jian wanted, then it was fine. Later that night, the scene shifted quietly. Inside a private dining hall, Sir Yan was seen sitting across from Yan Wu. The atmosphere was calm, almost ceremonial. Sir Yan smiled faintly, sliding a small box across the table. As Yan Wu looked down, he saw a ring resting inside. As Yan Wu wore it, Sir Yan remarked that it was a surprise, a matching couple ring just like hers, and asked if he liked it. Yan Wu looked at it for a moment, admitting that he didn't know much about such things, but even he could tell it was beautiful. He asked if he was really allowed to accept it. He had to take it. She added with a small laugh that perhaps she had gotten the size wrong and asked if she should exchange it. For now, he would wear it on his index finger and thanked her. Apologetically, Suryan mentioned that she had originally planned to exchange the rings in front of Rosa, but even after nearly a month of living together, Rosa still hadn't warmed up to him. She wondered when Rosa would finally accept that he was family now. She sighed, mentioning that Rosa had gone to a drinking party she rarely attended. She questioned why her daughter disliked him so much, and how long she would have to keep worrying about the same thing. Yan Wu smiled gently, asking her not to worry, promising to try harder since he genuinely wanted to become close to Rosa. The scene then shifted toward Rosa, where Guan was taking a shower. Rosa called out to him, asking if the bar they had drunk at last week wasn't owned by his father. John responded that it technically belonged to another person on paper, but his old man ran it secretly to entertain clients. Rosa approached, saying she would grant him one request, asking him to find out if Yanwu was really the same Yanwu living at their house, and if so, how he ended up working there, as well as how he met her mother. Meanwhile, the scene moved back to Sir Yan, who told Yanwu that she wasn't worried about him, but rather about Rosa. The next day at home, Sir Yan spoke with one of the workers, asking if it was really fine to move the plants outside. The gardener replied that it should be fine, since spring had been warmer than usual this year. Yanwu asked about the organizing, but before she could answer, he leaned forward to kiss her. Suryan explained that since spring had begun, she was moving the bonsai that had been kept indoors to the garden. Yanwu glanced at a pot nearby, noting how elegant it looked. He initially thought it was fake, but it was actually alive. Suryan smiled and said it was a black pine she had planted with her own hands the year Rosa was born. Both were of the same age. Rosa added that if it ever showed even the slightest sign of decline, she would replace the caretaker immediately, and this was already the sixth one. The gardener bowed her head, promising to take good care of it. Yanwu placed his hand gently on Rosa's shoulder, commenting that Rosa was truly loved. Feeling his hand, Rosa's expression tightened as she muttered that lately. It felt like her mother cared more about that plant than about her. Suryan remarked that at least the plant was gentler. It had never caused worry once in 22 years. Rosa chuckled softly, telling her mother not to worry, assuring her she was always studying her too. Rosa's phone suddenly rang, and she mentioned that the taxi had arrived and she would be heading out. Suryan asked if classes were starting that day and suggested they go together, since she also needed to head to work. Rosa agreed and they left the house together. The gardener then excused herself, saying she should get going as well. Yonu called after her, asking if she wanted help moving the pots. The gardener declined politely, saying it was her job to handle such tasks. Yanwu asked if she managed the whole garden by herself, to which she replied that she took care of the main building area, while the annex had its own separate staff due to its size. Yunwu nodded, offering to assist her with simple things whenever he was free, adding that he had plenty of spare time. The gardener seemed slightly flustered but accepted his offer. Rosa, watching all of this from a distance, muttered that he was doing it deliberately to get close to her. Later at the college, the teacher addressed the students, saying he knew they disliked group projects, but business studies and teamwork were inseparable. He added that not only in their future work, but also in life, they would often have to deal with people they didn't like. In that sense, he announced the two sitting together now would be partners for the semester. Rosa turned to her side, realizing that Jian was sitting beside her. Later, while sitting on a bench, Rosa sighed, remarking that she hadn't heard the phrase, pair up with whoever you're sitting next to since elementary school. She complained that she already felt exhausted and wanted to take a break. Jian smirked and said she should review the assignment since their professor would likely approve of whatever she submitted. Yan mentioned that regarding what she had asked him earlier, finding out about Yanwu, doing so wouldn't be difficult. But he questioned what they would do once they knew, pointing out that whether Yanwu had sold his breath or his body, Saran probably already knew before bringing him into the house. Rosa frowned, replying that there was no harm in learning more about someone she disliked. John leaned back, saying that if she truly hated Yanwu so much, she should just move out. He told her to inform her mother that she wanted her own place since the campus was too far. He added with a grin that he only saw his own brother's face twice a year and found it great. According to him, the best way to deal with someone one hated was to avoid them entirely. Rosa paused, her expression unreadable. John leaned in slightly, his tone low as he questioned if she truly didn't want that as well. If she didn't also want to stay away. Thinking about Siren, she mentioned that her mother was 48, and if she truly set her mind to it, getting pregnant wasn't impossible. John agreed, but Rosa asked if he wanted her to just leave those two alone when a crisis like her getting a younger sibling could happen. Jian paused, questioning if she wasn't getting a bit ahead of herself, saying he doubted her mother was planning on having another child. Rosa replied that maybe her mother wasn't. But what about Yanwu? What if he was thinking of getting deeply entangled with their family so he could settle in for good? She remarked that someone like him, a carefree, happy-go-lucky person with a broken relationship with his father, wouldn't understand. Jan commented that it sounded more like a string of curses. Rosa stated that he would never know what kind of reckless thing a person who was both deprived and unstable might do, which was why she needed to find out what kind of life Yanwu had lived. Jian asked why she couldn't just go and ask directly to her mother something like if by any chance they are having another kid, which made Rosa stare at him in disbelief. Then he smirked and asked if she could check whether they were using condoms too. Later, Rosa entered her mother's room, thinking no one was home since her mother had gone to work and she didn't know where Yanwu was. Until the previous year, she sometimes used to sleep in her mother's bed. They used to fall asleep while chatting about trivial things that had happened that day. Not on a bed that was soaked in a stranger's scent. The thought of her mother and that man doing such things frustrated her. She walked to the drawer and opened a box, thinking at least they were using protection. She admitted to herself that if she had jumped to conclusions just from seeing the couple's ring, she would have felt vaguely upset all this time. But now that she had confirmed it, she felt genuinely disgusted. The image of Yanwu taking out a condom, wearing it, and sleeping with her mother flashed in her mind, saying it felt good. Rosa screamed, throwing the box back into the drawer. She stood up, clutched her head, and kicked the bed, shaking with anger and frustration. The scene shifted to the garden, where the gardener thanked Yanwu for helping her for the past few days. Yanwu replied that he had told her he was doing it because it was fun, though he wondered aloud if the small fruit hanging on the tree was a tangerine. It seemed tiny, maybe because it was out of season. The gardener laughed softly, denying it and explaining that it was a kumquat, a completely different fruit. She offered one to him, offering a taste. Curious, Yanwu asked if he could just pick one himself, reaching out to pluck a piece of fruit. The gardener explained that the owner's family rarely ever ate from the garden. Taking a bite, a smile spread across Yanwu's face as he remarked on how incredibly sour it was, causing the gardener's cheeks to flush. In her flustered state, she yanked the water hose way too hard, drenching him from head to toe. Shocked, she stammered an apology, insisting her hand had slipped. A wave of panic washed over her as she apologized over and over, desperately asking if he was okay. But Yanwu just laughed it off, saying the water felt cool and refreshing. He assured her he'd just go change his clothes and told her not to worry about a thing. Still, the gardener's face turned beet red with embarrassment. As she stared at him, her mind flashed back to a conversation she'd had with her coworkers just earlier that week. One of the other staff had brought up the male guest who was staying in the main house. She'd mentioned he was about the same age as Lady Rose and told the gardener to be sure and say hello if she ran into him. The gardener had just figured he was some college kid, maybe a relative of the chairman or even a friend of the young lady. The coworker then told her to brace herself before dropping the bombshell. The man was actually the chairman's lover. The gardener had been completely floored, a young man who was the same age as the chairman's own daughter. Another staff member chimed in, saying even Rosa was reeling from the shock, calling the whole thing something straight out of a sleazy soap opera. They all wondered how the chairman could possibly get mixed up with a man young enough to be her own son. One of them, who had actually seen him, started describing him, saying he was tall and movie star handsome, and that he should have been a celebrity instead of some woman's boy toy. Another coworker scoffed that he was obviously just looking for the easy way out in life, basically calling him a kept man. Someone else added bitterly that her own son was off in the army, shoveling snow for peanuts. Another woman pointed out that this guy was probably the same age as her son, and warned her to keep a close watch on him when he got back, joking that handsome guys these days often take the wrong detour in life. The gardener had cut through their gossip, asking why on earth the chairman of all people would ever choose a man like that, which earned her some curious stares from the group. One of them finally answered that there could only be one possible reason. And now, standing right in front of Yanwu, the gardener saw the undeniable truth in those words. She realized anyone could see it just by looking at him. He had this effortless charm that just radiated from him. His entire presence was calm, and every single move he made was laced with gentleness. His soft eyes held a kind of warmth that could make a person's heart skip a beat without him even trying. It was like his charm wasn't just on the surface, it was woven into the very fabric of his being, the kind of thing that could drive you mad, for better or for worse. And watching all of this unfold, Rosa stood just a short distance away, her stomach twisting into a tight knot. A bitter mix of disgust and rage bubbled up inside her. A few days later, Rosa walked into the kitchen, and the moment Yanwu saw her, he called out, asking if she'd had a good meal and offering to take her plate and wash the dishes for her. He even told the nanny she could head out for the day. But Rosa just slammed the plate down on the counter and stormed out without a word, leaving the nanny completely baffled, especially since Rosa had taken her meal to her room in the first place. The nanny knew something was wrong, because this wasn't like Rosa at all. Yanwu then asked what Rosa was normally like, and the nanny paused, struggling to find the right words. Finally, she described her as a very calm and composed young woman who never lost her temper or even raised her voice. Yanwu then pointed out that she always seemed to be angry with him, which made the nanny flinch just a little. She quickly explained that it was probably just because they didn't know each other well yet. She added that the young lady could be a bit reserved around new people and asked Yanwu not to take it to heart. Yanwu simply nodded, saying it didn't really bother him, but the thought had just occurred to him. Later on, Sirion swept into the house, deep in a phone conversation. She was mentioning that the upcoming event would be at her villa, just like the last one. Only this time she was planning on making it much bigger in scale. She also added that Assemblyman Young had already agreed to support her. Tossing her bag to Yanwu, she started changing her clothes while still deep in her call, calling out to a President Seo and telling him to handle all the merchandise preparations. She also made it clear that if he was planning to show up, he needed to let her know ahead of time. Finally ending the call, she let out a long sigh, complaining that she was exhausted and needed a bath. Yanwu, full of curiosity, asked what the call had been all about. Sirion just vaguely replied that she was planning on having some guests over soon. When Yanwu asked for what reason, she shot back, questioning why he was feeling a little curious. Yanwu pointed out that she seemed like she was about to get even busier, admitting he was already feeling pretty lonely. Surion playfully teased him, asking if he was actually complaining. A faint smile played on Yanwu's lips as he closed the distance between them, asking if she'd comfort him if he said yes. He leaned in for a kiss, his hands already sneaking under her shirt, and unhooked her bra. His lips trailed along her skin, a tantalizing path as his touch ventured lower. Surion let out a soft murmur, telling him how good it felt and encouraging him to keep going as she looked at him with a sly half-smile. Then, out of nowhere, her hand shot out and gripped his neck tightly. Her voice, though soft, had a strange edge to it as she purred about how pretty he looked that day, asking him just why he was so incredibly pretty. Her words sent a shiver down Yanwu's spine, and trembling, he asked if she truly meant it. Surion's smile twisted into something sharper, as her hand suddenly struck his manhood, whispering that he was just full of charm. A wave of agony crashed over him, and he let out a groan. She tightened her grip on his arm, leaving Yanwu struggling to catch his breath, his whole body tensing from the sharp, stinging pain. He stumbled back, coughing, as she let out a faint laugh, calling him a baby before casually taking a seat on the top step. She then casually asked how his day was, to which Yanwu replied that he'd simply existed. Suryeon noted that since she got home late, he must have eaten with Rosa, wondering if it had been awkward. Yanwu clarified that they hadn't eaten together at all. Apparently, Rosa had decided to eat out by herself. The scene then cuts to a high-end boutique later on. Rosa tells her mother they really could have gone shopping without her, but Suryeon explains that she has an important event coming up, so they could just consider this shopping for that occasion. She casually added that the dress looked nice, but Rosa was feeling incredibly uneasy, finding the whole situation super weird. Shopping with her mom and her mom's way too young boyfriend. A sales associate started gushing over Suryeon, complimenting her incredible figure and explaining that the concept of their new collection was all about elegant silhouettes. The associate insisted that Suryeon would look just like a princess in the outfit. Suryeon shot a look over at Yanwu, who just smiled and agreed, saying she really would look like a princess. Rosa gritted her teeth, fighting back the overwhelming urge to punch him. Right at that moment, Suryeon got a phone call and let out a soft curse, muttering that something had come up at the office. She announced she had to leave right away, prompting Rosa to ask if she was going to finish shopping first. But Suryeon shot that down, pointing out they'd only bought clothes for Rosa so far, and since they'd had the entire store cleared out just for them, it would be rude to just up and leave without buying anything else. She told them to finish up their shopping and then head home. But before she left, she gave Rosa a specific instruction. Pick out something nice for Yanwu as well. Rosa just froze, completely stunned by the request. Suryeon added that since Rosa knew her taste so well, she could get him all dressed up and bring him right to her. Rosa just stared as her mother walked away, in total disbelief over what she'd just been told. The very idea of picking out clothes for her mom's boyfriend made her skin crawl, but what could she do? She couldn't exactly say no. Rosa thought back on what her mother said about her taste. She knew her mom well enough to realize that it wasn't just about her type, and even though she always claimed to know everything about her mother, she started to wonder just how much her mother actually knew about her. As her mind drifted back in time, she remembered her mother giving her a toy, neatly wrapped up as a present, a simple gesture that used to fill her with so much joy. Meanwhile, Yanwu was standing nearby, adjusting his glasses as he tried on a few different outfits. Rosa watched him in silence, chewing on her nails as one of the sales associates noticed he was struggling with a tricky tie and offered to help. But as the attendant carefully knotted it, Rosa's mind flashed back to a dark and disturbing memory, the same kind of tie that had once been used to strangle her teddy bear. Seeing Yanwu looking so sharp in his new clothes only made her growing sense of dread even worse. The scene then cuts to a pub, where a guy finds himself being approached by a cheerful girl. She asks if he's new around here and if he just started. The girl playfully teases him, commenting on his energetic vibe and calling him cute, before quickly deciding he's her pick for the day. Another guy jokingly complains, asking if she's just ditching him now that a younger, fresher face has shown up. Over at the reception desk, a woman is sitting in front of a monitor when Jian walks in, calling out for Nuna. She turns around, surprised to see him, and immediately asks about the young man with him. She wonders out if it wasn't their favorite young master stopping by, asking what brought him in and offering to call over some lovely ladies for him. John quickly shot back that his old man would have his hide if he lingered too long, insisting they were just dropping in for a drink and to say hello. The ladies giggled, asking John if he happened to know any broke but handsome guys, suggesting he should bring them around sometime. Not even a single touch. John just smirked, claiming that among his crew he was the clear winner in the looks department, though his only drawback was being filthy rich, as one of the girls playfully told him to get over himself. Finding his cockiness hilarious, Jian scanned the room, remarking that all the guys working there were unbelievably handsome. He repeated the thought, asking out loud why every single man there was so gorgeous. The girl replied that the absolute stunner of the bunch had already cleared his debt and completely vanished. Jian's eyebrows shot up, curious how anyone in that kind of business could ever pay off such a massive debt. The girl explained that a certain VIP client had requested him exclusively for more than 2 months straight, so the money must have come from that arrangement. She added that there was no way Yanwu could have possibly earned that much in only 6 months, since the VIP clients were all handled directly by the boss, and nobody knew who the woman he walked out with even was. She cursed under her breath, swearing that if she ever laid eyes on that guy again, he'd be a dead man. A chill ran down Jian's spine. He immediately thought of Rosa, feeling a wave of pity, knowing that if she ever heard this story, she would probably faint on the spot. He wondered if he should also try to track the man down, trying to picture what this person might look like. The scene then shifts back to Yan Wu, who flashed a smile at the attendant after she finished helping him, then stammered an apology before offering to bring him some tea while his order was being prepared, an offer Yan Wu kindly accepted. He then called out to Rosa, reminding her that it was already 5 o'clock, asking if she wasn't leaving soon, and suggesting they grab a bite to eat before they went in. When she gave him the silent treatment, he repeated himself, but she sharply ordered him not to talk to her. Yanwu replied gently, saying he only wanted to get closer to her by sharing a meal, nothing more. But suddenly, Rosa called him Dad. The comment stunned everyone within earshot. The attendants glanced at one another, whispering about whether they'd heard correctly and just who she was calling Dad. Realizing what she'd just said, Rosa's temper flared, asking if he planned on hovering around her forever. She demanded to know if he actually thought she would just forget everything that happened. She told him to knock it off, confessing that she was barely holding herself together. Yanwu lowered his gaze for a second before looking up again, telling her gently that she talked a big game about not caring. And yet, she kept giving him chances. His lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Rosa stared back, her eyes completely cold and devoid of emotion. She snatched her bag and walked out in stony silence. Her thoughts were a whirlwind as she recalled all her encounters with Yanwu. The way he behaved around the keeper, the gardener, and even her own mother. She couldn't shake the feeling that her most cherished toy was being fought over and torn apart by everyone. Her memory drifted back even further, to the time when Yanwu had asked about Srian's type in men. That moment had left her feeling deeply unsettled. She remembered how close he'd gotten, the warmth of his breath brushing against her skin, and how something inside her had stirred with confusion. It was in that moment she had a painful realization. She and her mother shared the exact same taste in men. Just as that horrifying thought struck her, her phone began buzzing like crazy with a flood of messages. It was Jian. He had texted her over and over, reminding her of her promise, how she once told him she'd grant his wish if he completed the task she gave him. Meanwhile, Jian was on the phone with Rosa, telling her everything he'd learned about Yan Wu, explaining that after he cut all contact, even his own manager swore she had no idea what happened to him. He asked Rosa what she thought about all this. As far as he was concerned, it all seemed pretty obvious from the start, but considering the timeline, he said, it felt almost certain that the man in question was her Yan Wu. As he spoke, he was scrolling through his phone, browsing a selection of elegant dresses, when he noticed the complete silence on the other end of the call. He wondered why she wasn't saying anything. Jian reminded her that he had shared everything he knew, and now he was getting strangely curious about this supposed old man. He immediately corrected himself, realizing the guy was only 2 years their senior, and then joked about it, joking that maybe he should start calling the guy Big Brother instead, pointing out he'd never seen her so focused on anyone before. But before he could finish his sentence, a loud crash echoed from the other end of the line. On the other side, the sharp sound of a phone shattering against a mirror cut through the silence. Rosa just stood there, completely still. A wave of memories washed over her, the image of a car speeding right for her, the deafening impact, and the sudden, sharp pain. She mumbled to herself that she'd been hit by a car once before. John recognized the story of that accident from her high school days, asking why she was suddenly bringing it up now. Rosa whispered that this was exactly how she felt at this moment, as if she'd been run over all over again. She admitted that it was agonizing, but it had shocked her back to her senses. Sometime later, out in the gardener was gathering kumquats, thinking about how the trees were such perfect decorations, their tiny fruits so bright and pretty. However, since the chairman and the young lady refused to eat anything grown in the garden, she was always tasked with clearing away the fallen fruit before it could spoil. It seemed like such a terrible waste to throw them out when they looked so fresh and delicious. She let out a sigh, reminding herself that none of it was hers anyway. and went to grab a sack to clean up properly. As she made her way through the garden, she wondered out loud why Yanwu hadn't been by lately. He usually came by almost every day to lend her a hand and chat while she worked. She figured he might have gone out, though she'd almost never seen him leave the mansion without the chairman. Assuming he must be inside, she continued toward the shack. When she stepped inside, she froze. Yanwu was there, fast asleep on the old couch. Her heart skipped a beat as she whispered to herself, wondering why he would be sleeping in a place like this. It was still hard for her to wrap her head around how strikingly handsome he was up close. The lines of his face were softer and more delicate than even the most famous female celebrities. She stared at him, a small, amused smile on her face, and muttered that the chairman was an absolute fool. It was like he was keeping a beautiful doll locked up inside the mansion. She thought about what a complete waste it was to hide a man like that from the world. Still, she supposed there had to be a reason why someone from his kind of background would end up in a place like this. Having spent some time with him, she knew he wasn't crude or sleazy like other men she had encountered. Even now, he looked so peaceful, almost gentle. She tilted her head, questioning why he would fall asleep so carelessly in the garden room, knowing full well that she was the only one who ever came in here. It wouldn't be entirely her fault if she gave in to the urge to reach out and touch him. She had to admit, this man knew exactly what women were thinking when they looked at him. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of life leads a man to date a chairman the same age as her own mother, especially when he was only 24 years old. And yet, she couldn't deny how utterly breathtaking he was. She quietly wondered if she would ever see someone as good-looking as him again in her entire life. Her hand hesitated in the air before drifting forward. As her fingertips brushed against his cheek, she felt the warmth of his skin. All of a sudden, Yanwu began to stir. Without any warning, he caught her fingers between his lips, biting down softly. The gardener froze, gasping as his tongue gently pressed against her skin. For a fleeting moment, she didn't pull away. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she instinctively let her fingers slide deeper into his mouth, trembling from the sensation. Then, abruptly, a loud noise from outside shattered the quiet moment. The gardener jumped, snatching her hand back in shock. Her heart pounded as she realized what she had just done. She stumbled backward, completely horrified with herself and whispering, "What was I thinking?" She spun around and hurried out the door into the open corridor, only to find Rosa standing right there. Rosa's eyes were cold as ice, her expression unreadable. She asked in a monotone voice if the gardener was working hard today. The gardener stammered, forcing a nervous smile as she greeted her. Before she could say anything else, Rosa moved to walk past her, but the gardener, in a panic, instinctively blocked her path. Rosa raised a single eyebrow, asking what on earth she was doing. The gardener quickly said that if Rosa needed something, she could get it for her, claiming it was too dusty and messy inside and might be dangerous for her to enter. Rosa's glare only intensified. Her face darkened as she bent down, snatching a shovel from the ground. She held it up, pointing it menacingly at the gardener and remarking that she'd just found it lying there, wondering if it was supposed to be there. The gardener scrambled to grab it, apologizing profusely and explaining she'd only set it down for a second. She insisted she didn't mean to leave it and was sorry if it had been an eyesore. Rosa's voice turned to ice as she confirmed that it was, in fact, an eyesore. She stated that she couldn't stand seeing things just tossed aside, lying on the ground as if they have no place. The gardener bowed her head, promising to be more careful next time as she began to walk away. But just as she turned, Rosa's voice cut through the air, stopping her in her tracks. Rosa asked if it was fun, sneaking a taste when you think no one's looking. The accusation hung in the air, sharp as glass, and the gardener froze, her breath hitching as she nervously asked what she meant. Rosa held up the piece of fruit she'd plucked from the branch, explaining that she had no intention of eating it, but was curious if things taste sweeter when they're stolen. The gardener, with a slight tremor in her voice, apologized, saying the fruits were just going to waste anyway. She added that she didn't think anyone would miss a few pieces, since they were really just for decoration. Rosa fixed her with an icy, unnerving stare before quietly murmuring that she had a point and that she could go now. After the gardener scurried off, Rosa slipped into a small storage shed and discovered Yanwu, fast asleep. She looked down at his peaceful face and muttered that her mother's boy toy was just another pretty thing for show. Holding his hand, she mockingly called him Appa. whispering about what a pathetic state he'd ended up in. The scene then flashes back to the past. A younger Rosa sits in the back of a car, her eyes completely vacant. Suryan complained that the trip was taking forever and that their daughter might get carsick. One of the guards leaned forward from the passenger seat, respectfully informing the chairman that they were almost at the estate. Suryan then reassured Rosa that they would be there soon, telling her to be a good girl and wait patiently while her mother took care of some business. Rosa quietly agreed, which earned her mother's praise for being so well-behaved. Her eyes drifted to the window where she caught sight of a small boy playing all by himself near the gates. Back in the present, Rosa was snapped out of her daze by Jian's voice. They were back in the college lecture hall. Jian called her name, shaking his dead phone in her face and complaining that it had died. He then asked what she was zoning out about and why she was ignoring his DMs. He pushed the phone toward her again, urging her to just pick an outfit already, since she was the one who had to wear it. He explained that he'd just crushed a solo tournament yesterday, and this was his victory prize for her. In response, Rosa chucked a book at him, making Jian whine that she had promised him one wish. Rosa looked completely unbothered, shooting back and asking when she ever agreed to wear something so ridiculous. Their squabbling finally caught the professor's attention, who yelled at them to keep it down, reminding them that class was over and they should stop making such a racket. He added that if they had enough energy to argue, they had enough to follow him instead. He needed a hand organizing some supplies for the seminar the next day. Later, inside the storage room, Jian groaned at the mess, wondering how there could be so much junk. He grumbled that the professor had told them it would only take about 10 minutes. He mumbled that if Rosa hadn't been so picky about everything, they would have been finished by now. Rosa immediately denied it, but Jian just insisted that he was the one putting in all the effort. He did the choosing, the buying, and he was even going to be her personal stylist. She cut him off, telling him to stop whining in her ear. Out of nowhere, Rosa commented that the kind of wish she'd had in mind was something like scoring tickets to a sold-out show. Jian just smirked, teasing that what he really wanted was an invitation of a more personal nature. Rosa groaned, telling him his cheesy lines were physically painful, and demanded he get her some water to wash the filth out of her ears. With a pout, she turned away, but in a swift move, Jian pulled her in close, his arms wrapping around her as his lips brushed against her ear. Rosa flinched, asking what the hell he was doing. Jian grinned, whispering that he was just washing her ears for her, then sent a shiver down her spine with a teasing lick against her earlobe, making her squirm. She let out a sharp gasp, cursing as he nipped gently at her ear. His breath was hot against her skin as he murmured that her little whimpers were driving him crazy, that just the sound of them made him lose it. Rosa tried to push him away, reminding him that this was still school property and they couldn't risk getting caught, saying the professor had given it to them so they could lock up when they were done. It was clear he had this planned all along. In moments like this, he knew there was a simple way to get exactly what he wanted, a way that made it impossible for her to resist. Find the idea a little thrilling. He insisted that doing something you weren't supposed to always made it more fun. Before she knew it, Rosa was on the table, completely swept, up in his rhythm. Jian mused to himself that for a girl who had it all, the one thing missing from her life was a little excitement. He praised her in a low voice, telling her how smooth and warm her skin felt against his, and that he loved the firm way her body felt pressed against his. He could feel every muscle in her body tremble more distinctly than with any other girl he'd been with. A flustered and frustrated Rosa told him to quit talking and just get on with it already. Jian just chuckled, telling her to give him a little something, back and tell him one thing about him that drove her wild. Rosa paused, silently admitting to herself that there were definitely things about his body that she found attractive, but she'd never say it out loud. When she stayed quiet, Jian teased her again, reminding her that he'd been completely bare in front of her plenty of times already. Trying to hide her bright red face, Rosa finally mumbled that his package was huge, but Jian just scoffed, asking if that was seriously the only thing she noticed about a guy. Rosa rolled her eyes, pointing out that anyone with eyes could see he worked out. Wasn't that obvious? What more did he want from her? Jian laughed, pulling her even closer as he told her to give him her hand. He took it and placed it flat on his back, telling her she needed to appreciate her partner's physique and show a little respect for all his hard work. He leaned in and kissed her deeply, his words dissolving into her breath as the world around them started to fade. The tension in the room became almost suffocating, their movements slow and deliberate. But just as Rosa closed her eyes, a different face flashed through her mind. It was Yanwu, the very same one she had slapped just hours ago. Her breath caught in her throat as a wave of unease washed over her. Jian called out her name, his voice thick with passion, completely oblivious to the turmoil in her head. He let out a soft groan as she suddenly gripped him tighter, her cheeks burning bright red. Jian asked what she was doing, wondering if she was about to hit. Instead, she climbed on top of him and asked if she could slap him just once, just to shock him. Jian, completely thrown off and a bit worried, asked if something was wrong. He suggested they talk about it, but Rosa insisted nothing was wrong and that she just wanted to try it. Jian was stunned, thinking to himself that this was so unlike her. She was never the type to suggest trying new things in the middle of a session. Together. He remembered asking if she was sure about this, while Rosa had secretly wondered if this was what it felt like to be imprinted on someone. It had been strange for Jian, getting intimate with they about to ask if they should start dating. But Rosa interrupted, saying it had been more fun than she expected, and if the timing worked out, they should do it again. Jian had been left surprised by her casual tone. Even so, their relationship somehow continued for 2 years. Still, when it came to Rosa, he often struggled to describe her. She always treated intimacy as something lighthearted, almost as if it was simply fun and nothing deeper. Jian thought she lacked curiosity. He, on the other hand, had many things he wanted to try. He had even thought about suggesting playful ideas like tying up or other kinds of role play, but he knew that if he brought them up, her hand would probably fly across his face instantly. Ironically, that reaction was on his bucket list too, and he had just been waiting for the right moment. But now, unexpectedly, she was the one asking to slap his cheek. Jian questioned if since he had been the one insisting on doing it at school, she should also be allowed to do whatever she wanted. Still, he couldn't understand why Rosa was suddenly acting this way. What kind of change of heart had she gone through? Without another word, Rosa suddenly slapped Jian hard across the face. The sharp sound filled the room and her breathing grew heavier. Jian's cheek turned bright red as he froze for a moment. Just then, a few classmates approached the door, knocking and asking why it was closed since they needed to take out the speaker. While Rosa asked Jian if his rod was stuck out there, telling him to take it out. While outside, someone questioned if the door was stuck, while another suggested trying to pull it open. A voice mentioned the key was missing and figured it was probably in the supply room on the 3rd floor, so they decided to go look for it. Meanwhile, inside, Jian couldn't help but savor the moment with Rosa. He pulled her close, his hands tracing patterns on her chest as he teased her until she softly whimpered his name. A little later, as he checked his reflection in the camera, he gently told her to take it easy, warning that she might actually scratch him. Rosa reminded him that he was the one who told her she was allowed to hit him. Jian chuckled, admitting he'd always wanted to try something like that at least once. She quietly admitted that for her, the experience wasn't as satisfying as she'd imagined. It just didn't feel right, she said, and from now on, they shouldn't try anything like that again. Jian blinked, completely stunned and unable to accept it so easily. Deep down, however, he was eager to try it again, saying he liked it when she was this honest. When Jian suggested she trim her nails, Rosa replied that long nails looked pretty and asked if he couldn't just tough it out for her. Jian let out a light laugh, telling her there was no need to act so cheerful all of a sudden. Feeling completely wiped out, her body ached and all she wanted was to crash. But as she walked in, she heard the TV playing in the living room. She sighed softly and glanced over to find Yanwu sprawled comfortably on the couch, watching a movie. The way he was lounging around made her think he treated the place like his own personal kingdom. As she walked closer, however, she noticed something that caught her completely off guard. Yanwu's eyes were red and puffy, with tears streaming down his face. He was actually crying at the movie. Rosa couldn't believe what she was seeing, someone getting emotional over such a predictable, cliché romance story. She stood there in silence for a moment before Yanwu noticed she was there. Startled, he quickly wiped his face and asked when she got home and if she'd just come from school. Rosa just crossed her arms and asked him why he was crying. Yanwu got all flustered, insisting that he didn't even really know. He claimed he was just watching, and the waterworks started without him even realizing it. His voice shook slightly as he tried to laugh the whole thing off. Then, trying to switch gears, he asked if she had eaten and offered to whip something up for her. For a tense moment, there was just silence between them. Yan Wu gave her a small nod and said he'd just head to his room, telling her to call him if she needed anything. He started to walk past her, but Rosa suddenly stopped him in his tracks. Her voice was quiet as she said she hadn't eaten yet. Yan Wu froze mid-step, clearly thrown for a loop by her answer.